Hey, what's going on, role players? It's the Bard here and welcome back to the corner. Today's video is an objective look at the Paladin Oaths, so grab your holy symbols, pray to whichever god you pray to, and strap yourselves in because it's time for part 2 of the Paladin analysis. So just before we get really into this, there is something I want to address, and it was a comment I got about the potential weaknesses of paladins. So there's a lot to unpack here, but if you want to have a read of it, you can always just pause the video. But I'll give you the general gist of it. Paladins were OP because of game restrictions in the past. It's not really that way now. Their action economy is good because they have a lot of bonus cast spells. Their armor class is very good. The only things that seem to be an issue are the number of attacks they get and the fact that they are multiple ability score dependent. I do have a few thoughts on this one as it happens. This is a great comment, it's definitely worth a read in its entirety. Thank you very much to the original poster for this one. The ideas and counter arguments always give me pause for thought, and it's always nice to see them concisely written down and respectfully delivered, so thank you very much. You know who you are, keep up the great work. Objectively speaking, I don't think that the 2 attacks per round actually hurts the Paladin, because the same is going to be true for Barbarians, Rangers, Monks, and even some flavours of Bard and Warlock. Almost all those classes are in exactly the same boat when it comes to the things you've mentioned, such as being hasted or going for a 2-weapon fighting style. They're all going to have to do the same thing if they want to get more attacks. So the character is a frontliner. Most of its damage comes out of being able to smite things, so you're going to need at least a decent strength or a decent dexterity, because even finesse weapons are potentially a thing. Constitution is necessary for all frontline fighters, and you're going to have to stack your charisma in order to get the best out of your abilities and the spells that you have available as well. Also, even though it's not directly relatable, wisdom is probably going to be an important score as well. You want to have it at least an average level, so that you're not running into situations that you can't actually deal with. This is more of a role-playing thing, because some people do like to role-play their ability scores, but it's also worth thinking about. Intelligence usually becomes a dump stat because you don't need to be academic. There's a wealth of difference between intelligence and wisdom. Dexterity is one that also usually takes a hit as well, and that's pretty difficult to deal with because dexterity covers things like any ranged attacks that you might be making. It covers your initiative, it covers your saving throws, and it covers things like stealth checks as well. So those are some weak areas for the Paladin, very weak areas, especially when you consider the fact that if you're going to be going with heavy armor, you're going to be getting disadvantage on stealth anyway. So disadvantage stealth with low dexterity, the party is going to get found out, mostly because of the Paladin. Something else that's worth considering is, despite the fact they have their aura of protection, Paladins actually have very poor saving throw proficiencies. They have wisdom and they have charisma. Yes, your aura is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, giving you a reasonable save across all your ability scores. But depending on how you've generated your ability scores, you may only get 2 or 3 points of additional charisma when it comes to your saving throws. And those couple of points of charisma bonus probably aren't going to be enough to add to your saving throws when it comes to keeping up with the large bonus to proficiency higher level characters are getting. As it is, Paladins have a bit of a weakness when it comes to physical controlling spells, what with their saving throw proficiencies being in mental attributes. Spells like Web and Grease can be highly effective against a low dexterity Paladin, and Paladins can even have that massive damage potential they have really reduced if they get hit by a Ray of Enfeeblement, because they don't have Constitution saving throws either. The saving throw argument can be made for any character class, but a fighter, for example, wants to make use of strength saving throws to avoid being entangled, whereas a wizard wants to have things like intelligence saving throws to protect their mind so that they can continue casting spells. The Paladin falls into a little bit of a strange area because it wants to be up in the face of the enemy dealing physical damage, but all of its saving throws are geared towards protecting its mental attributes. For the Pally, their ability scores do cover what their proficiencies don't, but they only tend to be average across the board when it comes to saving throws, not excellent. From a role-playing perspective also, a Paladin can potentially lose all their power if they fail to adhere to their oath. The same is also true for clerics and to a lesser extent warlocks. Fail to do what your god wants or fail to uphold your contract and you're going to lose your power. While the gods could take your power at any time and for any reason, there's something you need to look at when it comes to the sacred oaths. It says the actual swearing of the oath is a formality, an official stamp on what has always been true in the Paladin's heart. Additionally, in the DM's guide under Paladin Oathbreaker, it says an Oathbreaker is a Paladin who breaks his or her sacred oaths to pursue some dark ambition or serve an evil power. With those two things in mind, common sense dictates that a paladin that loses faith in themselves will lose access to their abilities, even if they haven't lost faith in the gods or haven't done anything to transgress. Paladins are nothing without conviction, so fail to believe in yourself and you're done. And finally, the planes are always in motion, ever changing, ever shifting. Paladins and clerics can lose their power even if they've done absolutely nothing wrong. The gods might have their own turmoil and can't grant powers for whatever reason. Perhaps something is blocking the fact that you can't get your prayers to the deity and they thus cannot give you any power in return. Or maybe they've been imprisoned or even defeated to the point where they cannot grant power to their faithful acolytes. This can potentially be a great tool for DMs, opening up a whole new line of quests. The reasons could be something that's happening in the material plane, or it could require the players to travel to the outer planes in order to find out exactly what's happening in the celestial domains. This has the potential for some great role-playing sessions, but I will advise caution if you're going to use it. This is a precision tool, not a blunt instrument. Don't use this as a crutch to nerf players that are too powerful. Instead, it's a tool to show that the real world around the players is living, breathing, and always in motion. So let's look at the Oath of Devotion now and the spells that it always has prepared. Protection from Evil and Good is a spell that I want to like, however it only protects against specific types of creatures, and it protects against being frightened, charmed, or possessed by those specific types of creatures. Also, if you look at its material component, you either need a flask of holy water or powdered silver, which is consumed by the spell. A flask of holy water is 25 gold pieces a pop. Whilst that might sound like an initially harsh criticism, I think it's a spell that's okay to have in your Oath spell list, for the simple fact is, I wouldn't go out of my way to prepare it specifically, unless I knew ahead of time what I was going up against, so always having it for free, that I can deal with. Sanctuary, on the other hand, is a great spell to have as a permanent fixture. Great for your escort quests, where you have to keep someone protected during a combat, or if you've got, say, a ritual caster in your group who's halfway through their particular spell, and then suddenly there's an attack, a quick bonus action, and they might still be able to carry on doing what they're doing. You should know me by now, I think Lesser Restoration is a god tier spell. It can remove any one disease, or it can remove blinded, deafened, poisoned, or paralysis. There's no reason that any divine character shouldn't be carrying this, and because you're getting it for free, and you'd never have to worry about preparing it, it's always in your back pocket. Absolutely amazing spell, a really great addition to the spell list. Zone of Truth is another spell that I don't feel one way or the other about. Its effects are only useful while the creature is within its radius, which means that if it leaves it can continue lying to you again. But it wouldn't even be so bad if not for the fact that at the end of the spell description they give you a bunch of ways that the creature can get around telling you the truth anyway. Beacon of Hope is another one from the I want to like this group, but unfortunately I just can't. This is the spell for the woefully unprepared party. The most you're going to get out of this is the advantage to wisdom saving throws. The advantage to death saving throws isn't going to come up very frequently. If death saving throws happen to be a thing at the time, it's probably something that can be fixed with a spare the dying cantrip or a cure wound spell. And unless you've got someone else in the party who can cast healing spells, you're probably not going to make use of the maximized healing anyway, because you're only going to burn through your own spells and you don't have many to spare. Dispel Magic is such an important spell that even characters with limited spell selections often take it. However, the thing to be aware of as a paladin is that you're only half casting progression. You don't get your 3rd level spells until level 9, at which time many other dedicated spellcasters are already casting 5th level spells. In many cases then, if you want to deal with higher level spells, you're going to have to make ability checks instead of just being able to dispel them automatically. At low levels this isn't quite so bad, but when you're talking about high level play, you're going to have to consider the fact that 9th level spells are going to require a 19 in order to dispel them. Now if you've got 4 or 5 charisma bonus, you still need to roll about 14 or 15 in order to get a successful dispel, and that's going to be really hard to do. Freedom of movement is the answer to a lot of those physical controlling options that we were talking about earlier. However, it comes so late in the Paladin's progression, you're not going to get access to this spell until at least level 13, at which point a lot of those controlling spells aren't going to be used as often. Despite that little gripe, however, it's still a spell that I'm grateful to see on the Paladin's Oath list, because a melee character who can't melee is a useless character, so being able to get to your target, absolutely crucial. If I'm in a combat and someone casts a spell and it creates a huge, great glowing sword and shield, you can bet your last gold piece I'm not going anywhere near that thing. Whilst Guardian of Faith does do significant damage, I expect that most intelligent creatures are just going to nope out of that situation, and they're definitely not going to want to engage the Paladin in melee with the Guardian of Faith standing next to them. As such, it's just one of those spells that is easily avoidable, too high a level, and doesn't deal enough damage in order for it to be useful. Guardian of Faith therefore has a potential to be a soft controlling spell, but at that level of play, a soft control is not something that most creatures are going to concern themselves with. A Paladin's 5th level spell slots come in at character level 17, and they only get a second one at character level 19. Unless I'm taking the whole day off from adventuring, I am not going to waste the only 5th level slot that I spent 17 levels trying to get to ask my deity a few yes-no questions. Flame Strike is just a spell that makes me feel sad in general. It essentially does the same thing as a fireball with a few sparkly bits added on. That's bad enough for a cleric of 9th level, but for a paladin at level 17, I'm sorry, I just cannot use this thing. If I am going to be using my 5th level paladin spells for anything, I would much rather be using a Raise Dead, a Banishing Smite, or a Circle of Power. So it's not a great start for the Oath of Devotion spell list. Let's move on to the abilities and see what's available, starting off with the Channel Divinity abilities. So we kick off the abilities with Sacred Weapon, and it's practically everything I want in a Channel Divinity. Yes, I want more bonuses to my to-hit roll, and yes, I want to be able to cut through a creature's damage resistance. The weapon also sheds light in a big radius, but you don't really care about that. What you do care about is being able to hit your target and hit it effectively. So it might be time now to bust out that great sword and start using that great weapon Master Feat to full effect. While the bonuses on your attack roll are nice, I feel that the real prize for this is the ability to make your weapon magical if it wasn't already. There are a lot of creatures that can only be effectively harmed by magical weapons, and some creatures that can only be effectively harmed by special material and magical weapons. So if you've got the special material weapon, at least you can enchant it to be magical as well. One word of caution, however, this ability only works on the weapon itself, and it's only active as long as you're holding it. If you're disarmed, the power is lost. And unfortunately you only get one Channel Divinity per short or long rest. Turn the Unholy only works against undead and fiends. Now, that's a little bit limiting, but what it does exceptionally well. This forces one of those creatures to use their movement to move away, their action to continue moving away, and it completely locks down their reactions. These creatures are thus one failed saving throw away from being able to do nothing for 1 minute, barring run away from you in abject terror. Moving on to the other abilities now, and at level 7 you gain the Aura of Devotion. You and any creature that is friendly towards you within 10 feet of you cannot be charmed. Not only is this good in combat, but it's also great in social situations where there might be creatures using magic to try to influence your decisions. I'm actually genuinely impressed by this ability because it has a utility function as well. And if you are at the negotiating table, the majority of the time your whole party is going to be within 10 feet of you anyway. And like all your paladin auras, this one also gets an increase to a 30-foot radius when you hit level 18. At level 15 you get Purity of Spirit. You are always under the effect of the Protection from Evil and Good spell. This saves you on any castings that you might have to do, and it means you don't have to worry about any costly material components. What is it the kids are saying these days? It's just free real estate? And finally your big level 20 ability is Holy Nimbus. Poor name, poor effect. You're dealing 10 damage every round to creatures within the area of bright light, and you have advantage on saving throws against undead and fiends, which is specific again, as we've already discussed. Up to 60 damage to everything within 30 feet of you isn't really anything to be sniffed at, however, but it just feels like it's paling in comparison to some of the other offerings from the other oaths that are available. The Oath of Devotion is your typical White Knight. Honour, courage, duty. It's also a specialised fiend and undead hunter. You may enjoy playing the Gallant Knight, and for that reason alone, go for this oath. It's more important that you play something that you enjoy and that you concentrate on the character. But from an objective point of view, this character class option is not giving you enough to deal with the wide array of things that D&D has to throw against you. The Oath of the Ancients is for those that have an affinity for the Fey creatures, enjoy the wilds, and have a passion for anything that grows. A paladin with the Oath of the Ancients can therefore often be described as a champion of nature. Ensnaring Strike is the first spell that you get on your Oath of the Ancient spell list, and for a paladin particularly, it's an excellent option. It's a fairly solid controlling spell, it also deals some damage, it's a bonus action to cast, and you activate it using a weapon strike, as all paladins want to be doing. Admittedly, its usefulness does drop off a little bit as you either gain in levels or as creatures increase in size. Despite that, however, it's still a good starting spell for controlling a creature while you go off and deal with other things. Speak with Animals is a fairly okay information gathering spell. I am surprised at just how many classes have access to it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll always be preparing them. As such, I probably wouldn't prepare this spell ahead of time. So having it for free and the fact that it's a low level, I can see you getting some use out of it. Misty Step is a bonus cast short range teleport. There's really nothing more that I can say about this other than the fact that you should be able to find some use for this spell. A precarious jump you don't think you can manage in heavy armor, a barred gate that you want to get beyond, or even just getting out of combat if you feel the odds are overwhelming. Next up is Moonbeam. Yes, space lasers! It's an okay spell, I guess. It's dealing fair damage, it's got a small radius effect. It continues from round to round for the next minute, so it's okay. As it is, however, if you want to move the cylinder, it's going to require your action, and I'd rather be using my action for swinging my sword, because there's no saving throw against the sword swing. Plant Growth, what a spell! Criminally overlooked in my opinion. There's no concentration for this spell, there's no saving throw for this spell, the effect of it is essentially permanent. Creatures have to spend 4 feet of movement in order to get 1 foot further forward. You can even create little safe zones in it so that it's not affecting your party. An absolutely incredible spell that lots of people really need to look at. This spell also has a utility function, so there's more that you can do with it. But the best part about it is since it doesn't progress with your spell slots, and since there's no save or no checks against it, it doesn't matter what level you are when you cast this. You can cast this at the minimum level available to a paladin, or you can cast it as a 20th level druid. It's going to do the same thing and affect everything in the same way. Since you're a half casting progression, you're going to want spells that are effective at their base casting level. This spell performs that role admirably, great for dealing with attackers, great for slowing down pursuers, and also great for just making your garden look pretty. I can't say enough good things about this spell. It's absolutely incredible in my opinion. I think everyone should try casting it at least once, and it really covers all of the little problem areas that Paladin spellcasting has by completely ignoring them. Excellent spell, just make sure you try it. Protection from Energy is an okay spell, does exactly what it says on the tin. Nothing really special that you can do with it. Solid resistance against your choice of either fire, cold, lightning, acid, or thunder. The one good thing about these kind of spells though is that resistance is always going to be resistance regardless of what level you cast it at. Therefore, half damage will always be half damage. Therefore, at low levels you might not notice it as much. At higher levels, however, you really start to see just how much damage this thing is actually mitigating. Ice Storm is up next, a 4th level spell, 2d8 bludgeoning damage, 4d6 cold in a 20-foot radius. The difficult terrain that this creates is also pretty useful, but unfortunately cold is probably the most heavily resisted element in the entire game. This is also a spell that doesn't scale very well either, and even if it did, it still probably wouldn't be worth using up your higher level slots for it. Stone Skin is a fairly good defense, offering up resistance to bludgeoning, slashing, piercing, as long as it's not done with magical weapons. If you have a look at some of the creatures in the monster manual, there aren't actually that many that have magical weapons or strike as though they had them, so it's actually a good defense and continues to be so even as you progress in levels. I know some people can be a bit iffy about the 100 gold pieces worth of diamond dust that this spell consumes, but it's certainly more efficient than having to use a 500 gold piece diamond to cast Raise Dead. Commune with Nature is a 5th level spell that can give you information about the land around you. Outside it can give you a 3-mile radius, and underground it can give you a 300-foot radius. This spell can give you information about the lay of the land, powerful creatures that are within the radius, or even any influence from other planes that happen to be going on at the time. As it is, just like Commune, I don't think this spell is giving you enough, not for the level you have to be to cast it, and not for the limited amount of spell slots you have at that level per day. Tree Stride is an interesting spell that allows you to teleport huge distances between trees of the same type. It's not a terrible spell, but you really need a whole forest around for you to make full use of this thing. Like I'm so fond of saying, the game is Dungeons and Dragons. There aren't many trees that grow in dungeons. And of course your adventures could take you anywhere, cities, plains, deserts, mountains, or even to another plane of existence. There aren't a lot of trees in those places. It's an interesting spell to be sure, but unfortunately it's not one you're going to be making much use of. Moving on to the Oath of the Ancients abilities now, and its first channel divinity is Nature's Wrath. This is a close range entangle effect where a creature can use either a strength or dexterity saving throw, whichever it prefers. However, with this channel divinity, unlike certain other spells, there's no upper limit on the creature's size, so potentially anything up to even colossal size could be entangled, if it failed its saving throw. Additionally, since it's a channel divinity and not a spell, there's no concentration on it. The creature simply has to keep saving every round until it eventually does so, making this a fairly useful, if somewhat limited, fire and forget. Turn the Faithless works just like Turn the Unholy, with the only difference being that it affects Fays and Fiends, rather than Undead and Fiends. It also has the added benefit of revealing shape changes for the true beasts that they are. It also reveals those particular creatures if they're under the effect of illusions, such as Disguise Self or even Invisibility. Other than that, it essentially works like the aforementioned Turn the Unholy, and I'm not going to take the time to explain what is essentially the same ability twice. Aura of Warding is just so over the top. Resistance to all damage from spells, the same goes for anyone within 10 feet of you, and anyone within 30 feet if you hit level 18. Absolutely incredible ability. This is a really powerful effect, maybe too powerful. But that being said, however, for you new players, make sure you understand the difference between what is a spell and what isn't. So something like Dragon's Breath, for instance, this isn't going to protect you, so you're still going to need things like protection from energy if you want to be able to resist the Dragon's Breath attack. It might be a bit of a silly distinction to make, but it's easy to get carried away and think that you're resistant to everything, and it could be the thing that saves your character's life, knowing the difference between an energy effect and a spell damage effect. Undying Sentinel allows you to survive on 1 hit point if you would otherwise be reduced to 0, so it gives you that reprieve and prevents you from getting one shot. On top of the obvious defense that it gives you, you cannot be magically aged, and you don't suffer the effects of old age. As it is, funnily enough, it's probably something that's not going to happen an awful lot. And finally, at level 20, you have your Elder Champion. At the start of each round you gain 10 hit points back, your spells are cast as bonus actions, and all saving throws against your spells and channel divinities are made with disadvantage. The disadvantage is only effective as long as the creature is within 10 feet of you, but the bonus action to cast all your spells and the massive hit point regeneration you get every round more than make up for it. Between your Aura of Warding, the ability to cast Stone Skin or protection from energy, the fact that you can reprieve on 1 hit point, and the fact that you can regenerate 10 hit points per round, the Oath of the Ancients is an incredibly tanky choice. Not only is this thing incredibly resilient, but there are a few really great spells in the spell list. Yeah, okay, there are going to be a few that don't really hit the mark, but the same is true for pretty much every class. Every class is going to have spells that just don't function as well as they should. Additionally, this oath doesn't feel like a paladin. It feels like nature's champion, and that's something that draws me to it as well. It might not seem like a lot to many of you, but to me it's something that's absolutely critical. From my perspective, I've been doing this since 2nd edition, so to me every paladin has always essentially been the oath of devotion. They always had to be lawful good, and the rules were always so much more strictly enforced. As it is, the Oath of the Ancients is still a heroic paladin, it's still a good character, but there's more freedom and there's more room to explore it as a character, and for that reason I can really get on board with it. What I'm trying to say, and I know it's a very roundabout way of saying it, is that I think this is a character that a lot of people can enjoy. You can still play the heroic character, but you're not forced down the virtuous knight path. I think there's a lot of opportunities here for good role playing for people of all skill levels, and if I had to compare this to something, it would probably be something like a fighter and a druid multiclass. From an objective standpoint, however, this is a great oath to take for players who are new to the paladin class. Devout but not too stringent, very resilient, and lots of options to help in a variety of different situations. Oath of Vengeance paladins are sometimes known as Dark Knights or Avengers. Their whole purpose is to smite evil and condemn the wicked. As such, the Oath of Vengeance spell list is primarily geared towards hunting, tracking, and capturing the paladin's sworn enemies. As far as first level spells go, Bane is an excellent choice. The spell affects 3 targets on its initial cast, it has fair scaling when it comes to higher levels, you only get 1 save against it, and if you fail, the effects continue for the entire duration. 1d4 might not sound like very much of a reduction, but we're dealing with very small and tight degrees of numbers here, and I can honestly say that this spell has saved me more times than I care to remember. Hunter's Mark is a spell that is so well suited to the Paladin. It's a bonus action cast, you can take advantage of the fact that you have multiple attacks, and of course the ability to have advantage on your perception rolls and your survival rolls when hunting the target always comes in handy. Hunter's Mark also has a 1 hour duration, and an even longer duration if you use higher level spell slots. Honestly though, I think my favourite thing about this spell is the fact that you can bounce it from creature to creature, saving you on any multiple castings. This is what a Paladin spell needs to be able to do. A good Paladin spell is one that you can make use of a lot of times, but the simple fact is you don't have that many spell slots available to you. Hunter's Spell is a very efficient spell for dealing additional damage, and if a creature does decide to run away, you can always put the mark on them and continue the hunt after the combat. The Oath of Vengeance gets both hold person and hold monster. Apart from what it can target, the same is true for both spells. Paralyzed is an absolutely devastating condition that can end a combat as soon as it starts. The only problem I have with hold monster is that it's 3 levels higher than hold person. Yes, it can target anything, but by that point, a lot of the creatures are going to have much better saving throws and are much more easily able to resist what it is you're throwing at them. Still, as with any spell, you really need to pick your targets. Choose things that are weak to wisdom saving throws and make as much use of this spell as you can, because it will absolutely devastate opponents. The Oath of Vengeance gets both Misty Step and Protection from Energy, so if you want my thoughts on that, you can go back and look at the Oath of the Ancient spell list, because they have the same spells available to them. What I will say, however, is that Protection from Energy will probably see more use for the Oath of Vengeance Paladin, for the simple fact the Oath of the Ancients has resistance to spell damage. As such, the Oath of Vengeance Paladin may find themselves using Protection from Energy to protect themselves against both magical and non-magical elemental attacks. Haste is another one of those god tier spells. Double speed, improved AC, advantage on dexterity saving throws, and an additional action which you can use to make either an attack, a dash, a disengage, hide, or use an object action. Haste is an ideal spell for a paladin. You can get to your enemy faster, you're even tankier than before, you cover that weakness of dexterity saving throws. It's just so good. Haste is one of those spells that you want to cast at every opportunity. It can potentially give you up to 10 additional actions. Even if I only got 2 or 3 rounds out of this spell, I would still probably take that over the 4d8 damage you get for using an equivalent spell level for a Divine Smite. Though I'm not oblivious to the fact that a hasted character can still use their Divine Smite, providing you don't mind burning through your spell slots. Vengeance Paladins get Banishment. Not only is it actually worth their time to cast this spell for a change, but it's also ripe for memes as well. Be gone, fiend! If you had any headphones in at that point, I'm sorry about your eardrums. In all seriousness though, regardless of who's casting this spell, the creature is just one failed saving throw away from having to return to whatever plane they came from. Even creatures that are actually on their native plane can still be disposed of for up to a minute, so this is a really great spell. The only real drawback is the Paladin isn't going to be able to get rid of a lot of creatures with this spell, considering the higher level spell you cast, the more creatures you can dispose of. But nevertheless, it's still an excellent spell for getting rid of elementals, fiends, celestials, and all types of other creatures that aren't native to the material plane. Look out, it's a Baylor! Poof! Gone. Much of what is true for Misty Step is also true for Dimension Door as well. It seems like it's a little bit of a high level for me, but the range is much better, and you can bring another creature along with you, so it does have some use to it. Still, being able to cover 500 feet within one action is a great way of cutting off any enemy that thinks it can escape your wrath. Scrying is the last spell on the Oath of Vengeance spell list, and it's a great little utility spell for keeping an eye on your friends, for keeping an eye on your enemies if you're aware of who they are, or just keeping an eye on any particular place in general. Admittedly, it's not the best of spells. It's 10 minutes to cast, and then you only get 10 minutes of use out of it. Plus the 1000 gold pieces it costs for the focus might be a little bit prohibitive, but by the time you hit level 17 you should easily be able to afford it. 10 minutes however should give you enough time to gather enough clues about the current creature's location. Also, if you get lucky when casting this spell, you might be able to figure out some different things. You might be able to see something that the creature is writing, or maybe overhear a conversation that it's having. Not only is this a good spell for information gathering, but it also gives your DM the opportunity to add things to the adventure. The exposition could add much needed context to an adventure, or scrying on something you weren't expecting to see could result in a really exciting plot twist. Moving on then to the Oath of Vengeance's channel divinities. The first on the list is Abjure Enemy. This one is pretty good because it's a 60-foot range single target fear effect that, if successful, can reduce the creature's speed to 0. And even if they do manage to make their saving throw, they're still going to be at half speed anyway, and I'm very much in favour of spells and effects that can still do something even if the creature manages to save against it. Abjure Enemy is an effect that's essentially quality over quantity. It can potentially affect more things, but you can only use it on one target at a time. At least fiends and undead get disadvantage on their saving throws, and this is potentially useful against any creature that's not immune to fear. This next channel divinity is just amazing though. It's a bonus action to use. Yes, it needs to be within 10 feet of the creature you're attacking, but that doesn't matter because you're a melee character anyway. You gain advantage on attack rolls against the creature for 1 minute, and there's no save against this effect. It's absolutely brilliant. Since it's only a bonus action to use, you should be using Vow of Enmity all the time. Whenever a combat arises, if you're going into melee, there's really no reason for you not to be doing this unless you absolutely need your bonus action for something else. Level 7 gives you Relentless Avenger, and what it does is it gives you a half movement after you've hit a creature with an attack of opportunity. What an absolute shame. It's not much more than a repositioning tool. Yeah, it's not going to provoke opportunity attacks, but I don't know when I'll be able to use this. Will I actually be able to make any kind of use of this? Are creatures going to attempt to move out of my way? Are they going to provoke opportunity attacks themselves? No one can really answer that question, and for that reason alone, you never know when you're going to be able to take advantage of this. Can you imagine all the paladins just sat around saying, "So, what did you learn at level 7? Well, I learned how to be completely immune to charms. Well, I learned how to be completely resistant to damage. What did you learn? I got a little ability to shuffle around, I guess. Oh, but they can't hit me for free while I'm doing it." Honestly, what a joke. Repositioning your character safely is such a valuable tool, but the problem is it only happens when you get to make an opportunity attack against another creature, and if that's not being available because the creatures are smart enough to not provoke them, then you never get to use this ability. I want an ability that I can actually depend on, not one that I may or may not use on the off chance that that very specific situation actually occurs for me to use it. Soul of Vengeance comes in at level 15. When a creature under the effect of your Vow of Enmity makes an attack, you can use your reaction to make a melee attack against that creature if it is within range. The thing about this, it doesn't say who has to be attacked, it doesn't say that they have to be hit, and it doesn't say about what the creature uses to make the attack roll with. That means swords, claws, or even some kinds of spells. If they're going to use those, then they're fair game for this ability. The other nice thing about this ability is the attack you make with it is going to be under the effect of advantage as well. Between this, your haste spell, and your 2 attacks, even the fighters are going to be impressed by just how many attacks you're getting. While this is a potentially good ability, my real gripe with it is that it runs off your Vow of Enmity, and if you don't have any channel divinities left, that locks away the use of this ability too. The last ability is Avenging Angel, 60-foot fly speed, and you gain a 30-foot radius fear aura. The real crazy thing about this ability is that it lasts for an entire hour. The fear aura is okay, and the advantage you get on creatures that are affected by it is nice, but the free flight is absolutely incredible. Before, the free flight was something I didn't really care about, but I've had my eyes open to it since then, and it's not costing any spells, there's no concentration on it, and of course you have free mobility to go where you like and still do other things. So it really does give you a lot of versatility and a lot of mobility as well. Oath of Vengeance has some really excellent spells on its list, but it seems to be lacking a little bit in utility for me. That's just personal preference though. All the spells it has are really efficient and they really suit what the character is supposed to do. When it comes to the abilities though, for me it's a little bit hit and miss. The channel divinity abilities were really good, but when you get to Relentless Avenger, you're getting something that virtually doesn't work at all. After that you spend all that time trying to get to level 15 so that you can get Soul of Vengeance, and that only works as long as you have a Vow of Enmity to use as well. I think I would have preferred an ability that was actually its own independent thing and not relying on something else, but that's probably just a balancing issue. As it is, abilities like Soul of Vengeance probably couldn't work without something like Vow of Enmity to keep the amount of uses per day in check. From a role-playing perspective, the Oath of Vengeance is a very straightforward one. Find evil and stamp it out like an absolute zealot. I think this is a good oath for players who have good role-playing skills, but just don't appreciate having too many rules and restrictions to follow. If you made it this far, you must have the patience of a saint. This thing took so long to do, 3 straight days of work, and God knows how many hours of research. And the real mad thing is we're not even halfway through the amount of oaths that are available to paladins, so we're going to cover the rest of those in part 3 of the Paladin analysis. Admittedly, what's taken such a long time is having to read through so many different spells and having to do so much research for each of the individual spell lists. It's all necessary stuff though, and I couldn't in all good conscience say it was a decent Paladin analysis unless I went through every aspect of it, including the spells, including researching them, figuring out what they do and what they're potentially good for. So that was an absolutely epic journey already, but we're only mid-range in figuring out exactly what all the Paladin oaths can potentially do. Thanks for watching up to this point. I know it's a lot of information to take in, but if I don't cover every aspect of it, then in my opinion, it's just not going to be a worthy analysis. And as exhausting and time consuming as it may have been, if it's what my subscribers want, then it's what my subscribers get. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you've got anything to say or you've got a request, leave it in the comments section down below. If you're new to the channel, why not hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell? And if you want to help the channel grow, why not share this about with your friends? And with all that being said, I will see you guys next time at the gaming table.